Good evening, Bahamas on the broadcast tonight. What's the possibility of a national lottery? Find out what the Deputy Prime Minister had to say on the topic. Plus, an elderly woman becomes the country's latest traffic victim. And the countdown is on to showtime. 9 young ladies vie for 1 crown.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our News of the Weekend edition, and thanks for joining us. I'm Andrew Knowles. Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest says he is open to the idea of a national lottery. While speaking to Rotarians of West Nassau this past week, the Finance Minister was asked whether the government would consider laying the groundwork to establish a national lottery in the Bahamas.
You know, it's hard to not answer that question without reference to the past. And I want to be careful about that because I don't want to start another debate. However, I believe that most of us will agree that a national lottery can produce tangible benefit to the country, not only to individuals, but to us as a collective. You know, there's no better tax system than a voluntary tax system. Right now, unfortunately, that voluntary tax is going into the hands of a few people. And even they are having difficulty in passing that tax onto passing it into the system.
In January of 2015, Bahamians overwhelmingly voted against regulating the web shop industry as well as the establishment of a national lottery. However, the Christie administration went forward with the regularization of web shops. Only 8 operators were granted licenses.
I think it is worth a serious look. You know, whether you believe in gambling or not, that's not really the question, at least not at this time. And I think that there is value in what you said.
During the campaign of the gaming referendum, the religious community had expressed concerns about gambling addiction and the effect it would have on families. Turnquest said, to be clear, he's not saying the government will seek to find a way to establish a national lottery, but that he is simply open to the idea as his aim is to bring discipline to government finances.
We recognize that we cannot continue business as usual and expect a different result. And so those of us who have the capability must do our part. That's what we say. We recognize that the economy is still challenged, particularly in some areas of New Providence, some family islands. And so, you know, anything that we do has to take in mind the human resource, right? Because we're not going to be participating in any action that is going to further cause the Bahamian people to suffer.
Accountants President Gowan Bowe says the Minnis administration has a big task ahead with getting the country on the right track financially. However, one big step, he says, the government can take is by looking at its tax system.
VAT has been successful with a 90% tax rate. Other taxes that they've had have been less successful with a lower compliance rate. So the question is, can I remove those taxes and put more emphasis on VAT? And that's not the simple answer. I'm not saying there's a direct line, but it is saying if I remove the inefficient taxes and increase the efficient taxes so that the overall tax rate stays the same, then that would improve collection and that would improve the actual revenues coming through.
Finance Minister Peter Turnquest said recently that government is not interested in creating any new tax, but may have to look at implementing service fees for consumers. But there's the concern over the value-added tax and whether there will ever be an increase from the current 7.5% rate. We asked Bowe whether he thinks government will eventually have to look at the increase.
Will they have to? It really is going to depend on how successful they are in the expenditure reduction. I don't think it's a magic number, the 10%, because if they were projecting a $323 million deficit, a 10% reduction is somewhere between 240 and 260 million, and that brings your deficit down to, 70 million, which was originally the projected ones when you looked at the fiscal consolidation plan 5 years ago laid out by the previous administration. So if they're able to successfully do that, then the answer on the tax side is no. But what I will say is trying to tax yourself into prosperity, Winston Churchill said, is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up. If you weigh the economy down by additional taxes, then is it counterintuitive?
In other news this evening, an elderly woman attempting to cross the Tonique-Williams-Darling Highway was fatally struck this morning. Police say it was shortly after 11 a.m. when the pedestrian was crossing the dual carriageway of the busy highway when she was struck by a Mack truck. Here's officer in charge of the Traffic Division, Chief Superintendent Craig Stubbs.
Our preliminary reports confirmed that a vehicle had stopped to allow the pedestrian to cross the northernmost inner lane of the roundabout. And as she was crossing, a dump truck that was in the southern lane of the dual carriageway would have made contact with the female. She fell on the roadside. EMS came to the scene. They did a preliminary examination and they confirmed that she had expired.
The victim's body was removed from bushes and carried away as several passerbys were on the scene curiously watching. Officers from the Traffic Division combed the scene trying to piece together any clues that might assist with their investigations, in addition to speaking with the driver of the Mack truck who remained on the scene. And whenever these types of tragic incidences occur on the road, there's always the question whether speed played a factor.
Based on what we can see thus far, it does not suggest that speed may have been a factor. From what we gather, the vehicle that stopped, the pedestrian was only we cannot say, but there's a possibility that she may or may not have seen the approaching vehicle in the southernmost lane.
Now, Chief Superintendent Stubbs reminded pedestrians to be cautious whenever crossing the dual carriageway of a major thoroughfare, and he gave these tips.
Crossing a dual carriageway, if one vehicle stops, make sure you ascertain that the second vehicle in the other lane has stopped to allow you free access to crossing the road. We have seen too many of these accidents where one vehicle would have stopped and a pedestrian just walk across and then walk into oncoming traffic. So we encourage all pedestrians, when utilizing these major thoroughfares, utilize the area that is demarked for pedestrian crossing, or wait until you find the way clear, or vehicles stop, they let you cross, and once you ascertain that all vehicles will stop, then we say you proceed to the other side of that road.
Meantime, police are probing the circumstances surrounding the discovery of a man found dead in waters off West Bay Street early this morning. It was shortly after 6:30 a.m. when police received a report that a man's body was found floating in the waters near the sand trap on West Bay Street. When officers arrived on the scene, they met the lifeless body of a dark male floating in the water. His body was brought to shore where he was pronounced dead. Now an autopsy will be performed to determine the exact cause of death. Well, the Minister of National Security has already admitted that there will be no overnight fix to the crime problem. But according to a former F&M member, she thinks a real crime plan must be developed and made public so Bahamians can feel safe. Giorgio Bain reports.
With alarm and concern spreading over the recent uptick in crime numbers, former Long Island MP Loretta Butler Turner says while it's fine to parade persons before the courts, a real crime strategy needs to be developed. Former opposition leader in the House of Assembly Loretta Butler Turner says the Menace administration needs to get serious and publicize an actual crime-fighting strategy. National Security Minister Marvin Dame said it would be absurd for anyone to believe there will be a significant reduction in the crime numbers in the country overnight, but the government's short-term strategies have already begun to yield some results, according to Dames. Dames added that his ministry is dealing with deep-rooted issues that lead to criminality, and as a part of a multi-pronged approach, long-term measures will take time to produce desired results.
We have murders, I think 2 or 3 this weekend, going down. We've had no address publicly with regards to what is the new crime plan. I'm seeing lots of saturation after the fact, but we always know that if we're going to be effective in crime, we now have, they say, one of the leading criminal police officers heading national security. I would like to hear what the plans are.
Referring to the Free National Movement's crime platform, Dames pointed out that legislation will be created for a national intelligence agency, which he called an important component in the fight against crime. Some of Dames' short-term strategies include increased visibility and using the existing technology that is currently at the law enforcement's disposal. According to Turner, with Dames being a veteran crime fighter, the bar has already been set pretty high.
It's no use saying you have a crime plan when we know that there is prevention, which we'd prefer, as opposed to apprehension. And, you know, it's good to haul people before the courts, but it's better to make your citizenry and your visitors feel that they're in a safe environment. That's going to be very difficult, you know, considering we haven't heard yet what the program is for crime fighting. And, you know, we have eminently qualified people that should be articulating these things.
The murder count now sits at 81, representing over a 22% increase in murders. Reporting for our News Weekend Edition, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Thanks, Giorgio. Director of the National Lead Institute, Troy Clark, says the government needs to get serious about implementing a prisoner reentry program in a bid to cut down on offenders becoming victims of crime. Clark says the current systems in place are simply not good enough.
From our perspective, the current crime situation is the way it is because there is not a holistic, collaborative approach between, I would say, corrections, law enforcement, and the judicial system, as well as the community stakeholders. We cannot work in silos to actually administer programs and services, whether they're preventative, intervention, and rehabilitative, unless we have all the stakeholders on one accord moving toward a single goal of crime reduction and recidivism rate reduction.
Clark's comments came after several young men who were recently released on bail were murdered in separate incidents. At a murder scene yesterday, officer in charge of the Central Detective Unit, Chief Superintendent Solomon Cash, again urged people out on bail for serious crimes to stay at home or risk the chance of being killed. But outside Cabinet last week, National Security Minister Marvin Dames said the problem is much bigger than telling people to stay inside, and Clark agrees.
Those individuals, maybe new condition of bails need to be placed on these individuals, not only tracking and monitoring, but supervision. And when we talk about supervision from a community correctional standpoint, every individual who are placed on bail should be placed in some form of program. Case in point, let's say somebody was in there for, let's say, some minor offense that requires bail, and this person made a decision to, say, break into somebody's home. This person can be placed into a program while he's on bail for what cognitive behavioral treatment, where helping to make better decisions.
For those serious offenders, Clark had this advice.
In the other case of individuals who are given bail for who have been what we call repeated offenders, those individuals probably need to be taken out of the community and be relocated into another community, because if we cannot guarantee their safety, because every individual is innocent until proven guilty by the court of law, then we're going to continuously have this hemorrhaging of retaliatory killings. And so there needs to be a stopgap measure right here, now and then, of individuals seeking bail.
And we'll take a break here, but still ahead tonight, a former PLP cabinet minister calls out the municipal administration. That story and more, our news returns.